All right, we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday, but I'm going to start the story over because this is too good a story to interrupt. All right, so we have Thetis is a goddess, Peleus is a king. They have a baby named Achilles, and Thetis wants to protect her baby, and she doesn't want any harm to come to the baby. So she dips the baby into the river Styx, and that creates it so that any part that the river touches protects him from all weapons his whole life. And so, since she dipped his whole body into the river, then his whole body is protected for his life. I want to introduce this character on the right. This is Patroclus. This is Achilles. Achilles grows up to be one of the most incredible heroes, and he has a best friend that he's had since childhood, and that is Patroclus. So we're going to come back to Patroclus later in the story. Achilles is trained by the centaur Chiron, and he trains Achilles to be the most badass warrior that ever was. Achilles is the Superman of soldiers. All right, and then this is the time where Helen has just been kidnapped by Paris. So the news, these are the Greeks, these are not the Trojans. And so this is like in Peloponnesia and around Athens. And all the kings are up in arms about Helen just being kidnapped. So they're calling for war, and the priest says, wait, the prophecy says that you cannot win without Achilles. In order to win and get Helen back, you have to have Achilles. But there's also another prophecy, is that if Achilles fights in the Trojan War, he will die. And Achilles' mother, Thetis, the one who dipped him in the water, doesn't want him to die. That's why she dipped him in the water. And she knows that if he goes to fight in the Trojan War, he's going to die. So she dresses him up like a woman and hides him among, the Lycomedes on Skyros, the island of Skyros. And so he's dressed as a woman and hanging out with all the girls. Well, the army that needs him to fight comes to get him. His friend Odysseus comes, and Odysseus is a very smart guy, and Odysseus can see through the disguise and calls him out. So, and Achilles basically says, yes, I'll go and fight with you. I don't really want to spend the rest of my days dressed up like a woman, so I'll go and fight. Athena gives Achilles the Aegis. The Aegis is a shield sometimes it's a breastplate, but it has Medusa's head on it. Do you guys, I haven't told you about Medusa, but you probably heard of Medusa. What's unusual about Medusa? Snakes in her hair, right? She has snakes for hair. And also, what can she do to you? Turns you to stone. But how does she do that? Right. And if your armor has her head on it and you're fighting somebody, they're going to have a hard time fighting you because they're trying to avoid the gaze of Medusa. So it's a very powerful tool, that this Aegis. And most often, though, it's on. In fact, you can see Medusa's head right there on her breastplate. The Aegis is usually a breastplate, but in this case, it is a shield. So we're now in deep in the Trojan War, and Achilles is an absolute monster on the battlefield. He kills Trojans left and right. He kills them by the dozens. He's the kind of guy that's on a chariot with his armor that is made by the gods and his weapons that are made by the gods. And his chariot is plowing through the Trojans, and he's killing people left and right. He has like a spear or a javelin, and he's spearing 4 and 5 guys at a time on his javelin. He's that kind of a soldier. He's that kind of a badass. All right, now, apart from the fighting between the Trojans, so here we have Troy, and all around Troy, there's other little cities. And one by one, the Greeks conquer those little cities that are around Troy. And from these cities, they take food and drink, they take the livestock, they take all the riches, and you know what else they take? They take the women. And then they distribute the women to the heroes of the Greek army. So here we have Agamemnon over here on the left. This is Achilles in the middle. This is Diomedes on the right. And there are lots of other heroes and generals and kings that are fighting on the side of the Greeks. But these are the like three of my favorites: Agamemnon, Achilles, and Diomedes. Each one gets a woman that has been taken from the neighboring towns. Now, the father of one of those women comes to Agamemnon and says, "Can I please have my daughter back?" Right? But this father is also a priest of Apollo. And Agamemnon says, "No, all right, I got her in battle, and so I'm going to keep her." So the priest prays to Apollo and says that, I, as a priest of Apollo, have been disrespected, and therefore you have been disrespected, Apollo. So what are you going to do to fix this? Apollo causes a lot of the Greeks to start dying. And in order to fix it, Agamemnon returns the daughter to the priest, and therefore Agamemnon is without a woman, and there's no more women left to give to him. So he decides he's going to take Achilles' woman. And so Achilles reluctantly gives his woman to to Agamemnon. And Achilles is pissed off and he pouts. He does this epic hissy fit and he says, "All right, but I'm not going to fight for you anymore. I'm just going to sit on the beach while you guys fight the war against the Trojans. And me and my army, we're just going to sit this out. You can fight without me. If you're going to treat me like that, you're going to fight without me." And what happens is without Achilles being on the battlefield, the most badass of warriors, and his badass army, the Trojans start winning. The Trojans are really kicking the asses of the Greeks, and they are begging Achilles to come back to the battlefield. And he says, "No, all right, you disrespected me. I'm not going to fight for somebody that disrespects me." All right, so what happens then, it looks like the Greeks are going to lose this whole war. They've been fighting for years and they're going to lose because Achilles is not fighting with them. So Patroclus, you remember Patroclus, the friend of Achilles? He's there at the Trojan War. He dresses up like Achilles and he wears Achilles' armor. He gets in Achilles' chariot. He has Achilles' weapons and he goes out into the battlefield and begins to fight, pretending to be Achilles. And at first, the Greeks or the Trojans are scared. They look out and they see, "Oh crap, the Achilles is back on the battlefield." And so for a while, he is really hurting the Trojans. In fact, his ruse or his trickery, uh, uh, making the Trojans think that Achilles is back on the field, they run and hide. And so they go back into the walls of Troy. All right. And it looks like the Greeks are going to win. They're chasing the Trojans back into the walls. All right. But there's one Trojan that didn't run, and that was Hector. Hector knows that this is not Achilles because Hector has fought Achilles before. Hector is the biggest, baddest hero of the Trojans. So he's way more powerful than Patroclus. Anyways, he fights with Patroclus. He kills Patroclus and he takes Achilles' armor. When Achilles hears that his best friend for his whole life has been killed, he throws another fit. He's in a fit of rage. He is crying. He is tearing his hair out. He is on the beach, pounding the sand and wailing over the death of his friend. His mother, the goddess Thetis, hears him and comforts him and gets him new armor. So she goes up to Mount Olympus and gets Hephaestus to make new armor for Achilles. In the meantime, Ajax, another hero of the Greeks, brings the body of Patroclus back to the camp of the Greeks. Achilles gets his brand new armor. Achilles makes up with Agamemnon because he's absolutely furious at Hector for killing his best friend. So he's going to go back to fight, and they both make up. Agamemnon gives Achilles his woman back, and then Achilles goes out onto the field and he is looking for Hector. And he is plowing through all of the Greeks, the Trojans. He is killing them left and right, looking for Hector. And then he finds Hector. And he and Hector have an epic battle. Achilles wins, and Achilles is so enraged at Hector. He's so angry at Hector. He ties the body of Hector to his chariot and he rides the chariot around the walls of Troy for 3 days, nonstop, crying and tearing his hair out. All right, sometime later, they are back at war. All right, this is days, weeks, months later. I don't know, but Achilles is fighting, and he chases the Trojans back to the city of Troy. And it looks like this is it. We've been fighting for 9 years. This is it. We're going to win. We're chasing them back into the gates, and as soon as the gates are open to let them in, we're going in, and we're going to burn the city to the ground once and for all. And he's just about to win. He's inches from winning, and Apollo appears before him and says, "Stop. It is not your fate to take down the city of Troy. You are fated for something else." And basically, Achilles says to Apollo, the god of the sun, he rides the sun chariot across the sky every day. This is a very powerful god. And Achilles says to him, basically, F off. So Apollo goes up to the top of the walls of Troy, and he guides Paris to shoot an arrow into the heel of Achilles. But how can this be? He was covered in the river Styx, that he's impervious for any weapon. Well, his mother, as she held him by the heel and dipped him in, it was where she held him that did not get touched by the river Styx. And that's where he was shot. I'm guessing it's a poison arrow. All right, so Achilles dies on the battlefield. And then all the Trojans want the armor of Achilles. They're going to steal his second set of armor. So Ajax is standing over the body of Achilles, keeping the Trojans away from stealing the armor. Odysseus comes to help, and Odysseus holds back the Trojans while Ajax carries the body of Achilles back to the camp. They have a huge funeral for Achilles. That's a tasteless joke right there. All right, and then so then it becomes time to give the armor of Achilles to the person that helped him the most. And that person is obviously Ajax. Ajax brought back the body of Patroclus. Ajax fought off the Trojans so that he could bring back the body of Achilles. And Ajax is the one that saved the armor of Achilles. And Ajax has been a friend of Achilles for many, many years. Well, Odysseus is awarded the armor instead of Ajax, and Ajax is furious. In fact, Ajax goes into such a rage, he kills a few of the Greeks. And when he comes out of that rage, he is so embarrassed by his behavior that he commits suicide. All right, that is the story of Achilles and Ajax. So here we have a vessel, a, a pottery of Achilles and Ajax. And it's one of the first times that artists have signed artwork. This is a black figure vase. And Ezekias, the artist, is the most famous Greek vase painter and potter. And actually, this vase right here was found in Italy. There were Greek colonies in Italy. James, put your phone away. This is the reverse side of Achilles and Ajax playing a game of dice. So here we have two of the most famous and most badass warriors playing a game during their leisure time during the Trojan War. Achilles is on the left, Ajax is on the right. If we look closely, we can see the signature of the artist, and it basically says Ezekias made me. And it's this is kind of unusual where the artist makes the pot and paints it. Usually have one artist that makes the vessel, another artist paints it. They are both labeled, so that's why we know who these are. This is Achilles. This is Ajax. Achilles says four. All right, it's Tessara, which is Greek for four, and Ajax says Tria, which is Greek for three. Achilles is winning the game. And it is perhaps good that Achilles is winning the game because he's going to die the following day. And it will be Ajax that returns his body and armor to the Greeks. And this is the calm before the storm. Achilles is going to die the next day of battle. And Ajax is going to commit suicide over not getting Achilles' armor. But I do want to say that like it is common for soldiers in their downtime to play games. You can see these World War I soldiers and these Civil War soldiers playing games as they wait in between battles. And on this one, this is just a little bit more of the story. So we're going to look at this handle right here. We're going to get close to the handle, and we can see Ajax carrying the body of Achilles from the battlefield of Troy. And then here is Ajax setting up his sword in order to commit suicide. All right, now on the left, this is a black figure painting. On the right, this is what is called red figure painting. And this particular vase, this is a separate vase from the one I showed you earlier. But this is one, it shows the same story, but it's black figure on one side, red figure on the other one, and that is called a bilingual vase. or it has black figure and red figure on the same vase. The previous artist that I told you guys about was Ezekias, is that right? And up here we have Endocides. And Endocides is, I think, the first artist to use red figure. Are we done with the definition? All right, I'm moving on. Is this red figure or black figure? It is red figure. Euthymides is the artist. This CA in front of a date, that means circa, that means around. All right, so there's something funny about this vase right here. All right, there's a couple of points of interest. All right, Euthymides was was in competition with another artist whose name was Euphronius, and written on the vase it says, "Euthymides painted me as never Euphronius could do." So he's saying, I can paint better than Euphronius. All right, and we have 3 revelers. Do you know what a reveler is, or do you know what it means to revel? Yes, it's party, right? So, and what do you, especially in ancient times, what do you think they do when they party? Yes. So we have 3 drunk guys right here, and this is a wine jar. And one thing I want to point out, if it shows up, oh yes, it's the first time we have a 3/4 view. This guy right here in the center, his back is frontal, his head is frontal, and his legs are profile, but his butt is in a 3/4 view. All right, so it's not a side view like we would have seen with the Egyptians. It's not a frontal view. It is a 3/4 view. And this is the opposite side of Hector getting ready for battle. You remember that Hector is the one that killed Patroclus. Hector is the one that was dragged around the city of Troy for 3 days. All right, and this one is a very shallow drinking cup, and it's not what's on the outside that is important. It is what is on the inside that is important. But I'm going to go back and look at my notes here. All right, so at this time, it is very unusual because we're still in the archaic period. It is very unusual to have a nude female. All right, most of the males are nude and the women are clothed. But here we have a slave girl who is getting ready for a bath. And also, that is also unusual because she is not a god or a goddess. She is not an important person of history. She is just a regular person. She's an everyday woman doing an everyday activity. And her torso is in 3/4 view, which is also new to art. All right, let's get into architecture. And with Greek art in the Archaic period, we're mostly looking at temples. There are no palaces, there's no monarchs, there's no real residential compounds that we look at. It's mostly temples. Now, Greek temples are kind of different. They don't do their rituals on the inside of the temple. The ritual is done on the outside of the temple. And typically, if this is the front of the temple, they will have an altar out here and do all their rituals on the altar in front of the temple. They would have a cult statue inside, and the temple is basically a house for the goddess or god that it is built for, not for the people. The temples are not for people, they're for goddesses and gods. And on the exterior sculptures, what we'll look at, there's images of deities, there's stories. And the very earliest Greek temples were made out of mud and wood, and they did not survive. Later temples were made out of limestone and marble. We've come across this term before, cella, when we were looking at the ziggurats. This would be the front of the temple facing east, usually. You'd walk up the steps past the columns, and then these are walls on three sides, but it's open on this outside. This might be a step right here. And then the door right here, and then the interior space right here is the cella. And it's basically just a big room. There's nothing in it. And then there's another like half room in the back. And so if we do a tearaway look at this, there would be a giant statue inside the cella, and then you would have this grand entryway right here. And you can see all the columns that are around this. That's a lot of columns. We get a closer look here. Once again, inside the temple, there would be a large sculpture of the deity that the temple is for. You probably saw this in the Hercules movie. There's a couple terms I want you to know, and we'll go through all of these, but freeze is going to be one of them. I'll go over this later. This is called metope right here. We're going to look at the pediments. We're going to look at the triglyphs. So let's start with the pediment. The pediment is the triangular area at the top of the facade. And I told you guys what a facade is, correct? Now, these facades would often have sculptures in them, and the sculptures would fit this triangular shape. Then we have the metopes. I want you to write this term down, metope, metope. The metopes are these images here, these square images. These are metopes. In between the metopes are the triglyphs. I want you to write that down. What does tri refer to? Three. You have these three vertical lines that interrupt the metapiece. And then I want you to know what a freeze is. Frieze. We will look at freezes later. All right. These temples would have been polychrome. And we're going to watch a short video showing how the columns were built. And this ought to take us to the end of the period. All eyes up on the screen. I want you to see how a column is made. You can see that the individual blocks that are coming from a long distance away. Oh, wait, we're going to have more time. What am I talking about? Well, more time after this, so we're going to take more notes. I want you to see what kind of machinery they used to lift the blocks. All right, and that would be the capital that was the last thing to be put on. And notice that those nodules that they had to have in order to lift them on. So then they carve it and they put the fluting on there. All right, I'm going to stop it there. That's basically how a column is made. So let's look at these columns. And here is a column that has fallen over, and you can see the different drums as they fell apart. And here is the columns of a temple that have been taken apart, and you can see also there's a hole on the inside of these, and there would have been a piece of wood stuck into the hole that sticks out, and then the next one that has a hole in it comes down, and it fits like a Lego fits. There would be, this would connect the two together. Now, there are different kinds of columns. These three on the left are Doric columns. The three in the middle are Ionic columns. And then the two on the right are Corinthian columns. And you notice as columns and this image right here shows early columns and then later columns. And columns get taller and thinner and stronger as we go through time. So let's take a look at the early columns, which are called Doric. The Doric column has a very basic capital. It almost looks like a bowl or a plate on top of the column. And then also at the bottom, there is no base. We have the capital and the shaft, but no base at the bottom. It just ends down there. Doric columns are still being used in architecture today. Here's a modern building. This is the Cincinnati Gas and Electric building that has Doric columns. And the Lincoln Memorial has Doric columns on the exterior. The next type of column is called Ionic. By the way, I want everybody to draw this, the capital right here. It is a very simple rectangle, and then under it is the side view of a bowl. Draw it and label it. Are we good? Need more time? I want you to draw this. It is a curly Q, and it goes across, and it makes another curly Q. By the way, that curly Q is called a volute. But this is an Ionic column. It is taller and thinner and stronger than the Doric column. And look, it has a base at the bottom. It looks like a scroll being unrolled. And here we can see Ionic columns and on the temple. But Ionic columns are still being used in architecture today. So in this building and on the interior of the Lincoln Memorial, there are Ionic columns. And then we have Corinthian columns. I don't expect you to draw the Corinthian column, but they have these leaves as their decoration. These are acanthus leaves. And I bet you're wondering, what is an acanthus? Well, that is an acanthus leaf right there. This is a very popular style of decoration in the ancient Greek and Roman art and architecture. But look how massive these columns are when you compare it to the people. Like absolutely giant. And I have a hard time figuring out just how even with cranes, how the Greeks were able to build these massive, giant columns. I'm impressed. All right, so next we're going to go to Delphi. And I need to tell you a little story about Delphi. Okay, so this story starts out with Zeus. He releases two birds, and the two birds fly in opposite directions. They go around the world, and one heads east, one heads west. They meet on the opposite side of the earth on a rock. This rock became the center of the universe, and Zeus put a python there to guard it. Then along comes Apollo. As a baby, Apollo used his bow and arrow to shoot the python, and he killed it. When it died, the earth cracked and its body fell in. When the body of the python began to decay, it emitted a vapor. And Apollo built his temple right on top of that crack with the vapor coming out. So now we're going to go to Delphi, and this is the temple of Apollo. And there's a cool Assassin's Creed video showing this bird flying around.
Hey everyone, we're going to be flying here over the Gulf of Corinth in one of its most highly prized locations in the area, the site of Delphi here, over by the Mount Parnassus region. And this is a very, very important religious site, home to, well, the Temple of Apollo and his spokesperson, essentially the Oracle of Delphi. So just to give you a bit of context on what's going on here. Well,
so right there is the Temple of Apollo. There is the theater. We're going to be looking at a building that's right down at the base of that.
Due to its proximity to the high mountains nearby, which were associated with the gods, as well as you can see,
but we don't have time
here, some streams coming by. There were some natural
to go in there, but this is a really cool video to watch. I recommend it. All right, so I want to explain how the Oracle of Delphi works. So if you have a question, if you are a person, if you are a king of a kingdom, like say, and you're wondering, what about this person? What about my kingdom? What about my child? And you have a question, you will go to Delphi and you will talk to the priests of Delphi. And the priest will talk to Pythia. She is the oracle at Delphi. And she will go into the temple where the vapors come out. Remember that crack in the earth? And the dragon fell down and it decayed and it created these vapors. She will inhale these vapors. So here she is, sitting on her high chair and with these vapors coming out, and she inhales the vapors and has visions of the gods talking to her. And so she asks the gods the question, the gods talk to her, and she has the answer. But the gods don't speak the language that we do, so they talk in gibberish. So her answer is in gibberish. And so she tells the priest what the answer is. The priests interpret that gibberish and give you the answer. So we've already seen this work, like in the King and Queen of Troy. She had the nightmare that Troy was on fire. They asked what was the reason for this, or what does this dream mean? And they told her to kill the baby, right? And that turned, he grew up to be Paris. That's how this oracle works. All right, so this leads us to the story of Oedipus Rex. And we now have, can I do Oedipus Rex in 5 minutes? I can't do Oedipus Rex in 5 minutes. So we will start with Oedipus Rex tomorrow. Are there any questions about anything that we've looked at so far?